Nicole Wilson's debut novel, Tide Pool, was a finalist for the Bram Stoker Award. Her novella, The Shadow Dancers of Brixton Hill, is out with Cemetery Gates Media, and her YA horror novel, The Keeper of the Key, will be coming out in November 2024. Nicole, over to you.
Okay, thank you for coming. Just to set the scene for the Shadow Dancers of Brixton Hill a little bit, it's 1937, and Kate is scouting an act for her family circus, which has been struggling in the wake of the Great Depression. And this act does something so unique and so shocking that their trainer, whose name is Louis Oswald, won't tell Kate what they do. He wants her to see the act for herself. And in this excerpt, she does. Oswald had built a small red brick theater on his property for auditions and for the exhibitions he sometimes held to showcase his students. The yellowed marquee over the front entrance read "Coming Soon" in large black letters, but listed no attractions. The wooden floor inside the theater was scuffed and dull. Faint odors of mildew and cigarette smoke hung in the air. Several rows of red plush seats led down to a stage empty, but for an upright piano at stage left, and 3 square black cushions lined up side by side on the floor, facing a large white screen. A bright stage light hung overhead. The sounds of people walking around and murmuring carried from backstage. The floor creaked under my feet, and Oswald emerged from the backstage area almost at once. He now wore a violet velvet ringmaster jacket with gold buttons that strained a bit over his midsection, black breeches, and knee-high black leather boots. In contrast to his graying mustache and goatee, his slicked back hair was still quite black. "Ah, Kate, right on time. Excellent." He walked to center stage and gestured to the empty rows. "Please, sit anywhere." I chose a seat in the center of a middle row. Oswald positioned himself under the stage light, took a deep breath, and threw his arms wide. When he spoke again, his voice boomed, as if he were addressing a sold-out house full of roaring patrons. "We're so honored that you traveled all this way to see my newest stars, Miss Montgomery. You will be very glad you did. What you are about to watch has never been seen anywhere in the world. I developed the idea from Egyptian mystics I met several years ago, and it took many, many years of hard work and heartbreak to perfect this astonishing act. Before we begin, please take note. You, I, and the performers are the only ones in this theater. And the sole sources of light are here and here." He pointed at the ceiling and then the footlights. "My assistant, Mrs. Mildred Morrigan, will be accompanying my performers on the piano this afternoon. Mrs. Morrigan?" A tall older woman with a helmet of black hair and Marcel waves emerged from backstage. She smoothed her hands over a dress the color of cooked liver and took a seat at the piano. She opened the sheet music on the stand and cleared her throat. "And now, it is my pleasure to introduce Abigail, Camilla, and Rose, the Shadow Dancers." Oswald hurried backstage. The lights in the theater dimmed, but the footlights remained bright. 3 young girls emerged from backstage in a single-file line. Their hair was pulled back in severe braided buns, and they wore matching white tutus with pink tights and slippers. They put me in mind of the young ballerinas in a Degas painting. At first glance, they appeared completely identical. But as they positioned themselves in front of the cushions, I noticed differences in hair color and height. Each of them turned away from me and sat down cross-legged on a cushion. Now I was looking at their ruler-straight backs and the stark black shadows their bodies cast on the white screen. Mrs. Morrigan launched into a piece I recognized from years of music lessons as Mozart's Turkish March. She played the piece accurately, but with little speed and no finesse. The girls remained seated on the floor. But then their shadows stood, towering over them on the blank white screen. My breath caught in my throat. I turned to look for any possible source of this bizarre illusion, but the theater behind me was completely empty. And then the shadows began to dance. They linked their black arms together and moved in complete unison, back and forth. Their elongated legs crossed and uncrossed, and their heads turned to the music with smooth, crisp perfection, even as their owners remained still as marble on the cushions. My pulse raced, and I took a deep breath. Remarkable, isn't it? So engrossed was I in this bizarre performance, I hadn't noticed Oswald approach in the darkness, and I jumped. "It is." I spoke to him, but couldn't take my eyes off the improbable sight on stage. "How on earth are you doing this?" "I am doing nothing, Kate." He sat down next to me. These amazing young ladies are able to manipulate their shadows all by themselves. But that's not possible. He let out a deep chuckle and patted my arm. You are quite welcome to explore every nook and cranny of this theater if you doubt me. Should you find any proof of stagecraft, I will compensate you for your time and effort traveling here and send you on your way with my deepest apologies. Feel free to take the stage to watch them more closely. You will not distract my girls. Nothing can when they are performing. Mrs. Morrigan launched into Mozart's Symphony No. 40 in G minor, and the shadows twirled and leaped around the screen, their black arms and legs moving in an elegant and precise fashion to the music. I rose from my seat and stared at the ceiling, but if there was a stagehand lurking somewhere in those cobwebbed rafters and projecting dancing shadows onto that screen, I could not find him. Moving with caution in the dim theater, I walked up front and stepped onto the stage, edging around the dancers until I could see their faces. And a chill spread through my stomach. The three girls, little more than children, stared at the wall like pale, dead-eyed dolls, lifeless and empty, their lips parted and slack. They did not blink. They did not glance sideways to acknowledge my presence. They were so still that for a moment I was unsure they were actually alive. Their eerie appearance reminded me of the time Father had taken me to a fancy toy store for a childhood birthday. He thought I would be delighted by the wide variety of dolls available for sale. Instead, the rows of lifeless little bodies with their glassy blank eyes, frozen faces, and gaping mouths disturbed me so much I cried and begged to be taken home. These shadow dancers looked uncannily like those dolls. I studied the girl nearest me until at last I detected the faint rise and fall of her chest. And then something else made me clutch a curtain in shock. Their dancing shadows were fully detached from their bodies. I scanned the theater behind them. Oswald sat where I had left him, exhaling great clouds of cigarette smoke and watching my bemusement with a smirk. Again, there were no signs of concealed projectors or anything else that could make sense of this display. How could this be happening? I glanced between the stone-still girls and their kinetic shadows, but no obvious answer appeared. I rapped on the screen where the shadows danced. It felt sturdy under my knuckles. Defeated, I left the stage area and returned to Oswald, who grinned so widely I thought his face might crack in half. Satisfied, Miss Montgomery? I took my seat. I can't figure out how you're doing this, but it is indeed an impressive illusion. As I have already told you, it is no illusion, my dear. Mrs. Morrigan reached the end of the Mozart piece and stopped. With that, the shadows retreated at once to their owners' bodies. And that's it. And if you enjoyed this, please enter my giveaway for a signed copy of this novella. And thanks again for coming.